Rainbow Road in Barrington is a quiet stretch of asphalt flanked by dense woods on either side. The name is misleading, there's nothing cheerful about it, especially at night. Locals whisper of strange happenings and shadows that seem to move on their own. For decades, stories of the road have circulated, but none are more chilling than the tale of Emily. It was a crisp October night when Lisa, a high school senior, drove down Rainbow Road with her younger brother, Josh. They had been at a late-night bonfire, and despite Lisa's nerves about the road's reputation, it was the fastest way home. The forest surrounding the road felt alive, the trees swaying ominously under the pale moonlight. The air was heavy, pressing against the car like an unseen weight. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Do you hear that?" Josh asked suddenly, his voice trembling. Lisa strained her ears but heard only the hum of the engine. "Hear what?" "It's like crying," Josh whispered. She laughed nervously. "You're imagining things." But then she heard it, a faint, sorrowful wail that seemed to rise and fall with the wind. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. The sound grew louder, clearer, until it was unmistakable. Someone was sobbing in the woods. Up ahead, a figure appeared in the middle of the road, illuminated by the car's headlights. It was a young woman in a torn white dress, her hair matted and darkened with streaks of what looked like mud or blood. Lisa slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the car came to a halt just feet away from the figure. She and Josh sat frozen, staring at the woman. "Should we help her?" Josh asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Lisa could respond, the woman's head snapped up. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow and sunken, as though she hadn't slept in years. And then, without moving her legs, she was suddenly closer at the hood of the car. Lisa screamed and threw the car into reverse, but the woman's face pressed against the windshield. Her mouth opened unnaturally wide, emitting a piercing scream that reverberated through the car. The sound wasn't human, it was layered, as though a dozen voices were crying out at once. Lisa hit the gas, swerving around the figure, her heart pounding. She glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the woman standing in the middle of the road again, her head cocked unnaturally to the side, watching them. The siblings didn't stop until they reached home. Shaking, they told their parents what had happened. Their father's face grew pale as he listened. "That's Emily," he said after a long pause. "She's why people avoid Rainbow Road." The story spilled out in fragments. Emily was a local girl who had vanished decades ago. She was last seen running down Rainbow Road, fleeing from a man in a truck. Her body was never found, but her bloody dress was discovered in the woods. Some say her spirit still wanders the road, seeking justice or vengeance. Lisa refused to drive down Rainbow Road again, but the memory of that night haunted her dreams. Shadows moved in her peripheral vision, and faint sobbing seemed to echo in her ears whenever she was alone. One evening, she found muddy footprints leading from her front door to her bedroom window. They ended abruptly, as though the person had vanished into thin air. The next morning, Josh woke up screaming. On his bedroom wall, written in dark, dripping letters, were the words, "Why didn't you stop?" Lisa and her family moved out of Barrington soon after. But some nights, drivers on Rainbow Road still report seeing a young woman in white, standing silently at the edge of the forest. If you're ever driving there and hear a faint cry, don't stop. Don't look. And whatever you do, don't let her get close. Lisa couldn't shake the events of that night or the aftermath. Even hundreds of miles away, in the safety of their new home, the echoes of Rainbow Road followed her. She spent sleepless nights scouring forums, archives, and any scrap of information she could find about Emily and her disappearance. One evening, Lisa stumbled across an old newspaper article buried in a local history website. It detailed not only Emily's disappearance but a string of other, eerily similar cases, all young women, all last seen within a mile of Rainbow Road. The dates spanned decades, as if the road had been claiming victims long before Emily's tragic end. At the bottom of the article was a comment, left years ago by someone using the name Lost Seeker. It read, "They never leave. If you saw her, she's with you now. There's a way to stop it, but it's dangerous. Meet me at the old mill on Fuller's Creek if you're serious." Lisa's stomach twisted. Fuller's Creek was only a few miles from Rainbow Road. The post was old. Who knew if the person was still around? But Lisa couldn't ignore it. She needed answers, and this was the first real lead she had. Against her better judgment, Lisa found herself back in Barrington one foggy evening. She hadn't told anyone where she was going, not her parents, not Josh. She parked her car near the crumbling remains of the Fuller's Creek mill and waited. The area was eerily silent, save for the faint trickle of water from the creek. The air was damp and smelled of rotting wood and moss. Lisa kept glancing over her shoulder, her nerves on edge. Finally, a figure emerged from the shadows, carrying a lantern. The man was wiry and hunched, with eyes that darted around as if expecting something to leap out of the dark. His voice was gravelly and low when he spoke. "You saw her, didn't you?" Lisa nodded, her throat dry. "What do you mean she's with me?" The man sighed. "Emily's spirit clings to anyone who survives an encounter with her. She'll haunt you, try to pull you back. She doesn't want help, she wants company." Lisa felt a cold chill run down her spine. "You said there's a way to stop it." "There is," the man said, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. "But it's not just Emily you're dealing with. Rainbow Road is cursed. It's like a gateway. She's just one of the things that's come through." "What does that mean?" Lisa demanded. The man hesitated, as if debating how much to tell her. "It means Emily's not alone. She's part of something bigger, darker. And if you want to end this, you'll have to face it." When Lisa returned home, she found her brother sitting on the floor of his room, pale and shaking. On his neck was a handprint, small, slender, and impossibly cold to the touch. "She was here," Josh whispered, his voice breaking. "She told me to come back." Lisa's heart raced. The thought of Emily or whatever she'd become targeting Josh was too much. She knew she had to act quickly, but her mind swirled with questions. What was the connection between Emily, Rainbow Road, and the other disappearances? And what was the something darker the man had warned her about? Late that night, Lisa dreamed of Rainbow Road. She was driving again, but this time, the sobbing was louder, coming from all directions. Shadows flickered between the trees, and every time she glanced at her rearview mirror, she saw more figures standing in the road, women, children, and men, all with lifeless eyes. At the end of the road stood Emily, her head cocked to the side. But behind her, towering and indistinct, was something massive, shifting like smoke and shadow. It had no form, only eyes, dozens of them, glowing faintly, watching her. Lisa jolted awake, gasping for breath. The whispers from her dream lingered in her ears, soft but distinct. "Come back. The road is waiting." Lisa knew she couldn't run forever. She couldn't protect Josh or herself unless she confronted the darkness head-on. But how could she face something she didn't even understand? Desperate, she reached out to the man from Fuller's Creek. He agreed to help, but his message was cryptic. "Meet me at the road tomorrow night. Bring something you fear losing most, and be prepared to leave it behind." Lisa didn't know what he meant, but she couldn't ignore the urgency in his words. She packed her bag, kissed Josh on the forehead, and prepared to return to Rainbow Road one last time. But as she stepped out into the cold night, her phone buzzed. A single text flashed on the screen. "Don't trust him." The sender was unknown. "Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story." Lisa stared at the message, her hands trembling. It was only 3 words, but they sent her mind spiraling. Don't trust him. Who had sent it? How did they know what she was about to do? She glanced around the dimly lit street outside her home, half expecting to see someone watching her, but the road was empty. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. "You're not alone." Lisa's pulse quickened. The sender's number was still unknown. She debated responding but decided against it. Something about the text unsettled her, as though whoever sent it knew more than they should. The drive to Rainbow Road was uneventful, but Lisa's anxiety grew with each passing mile. The woods loomed darker than she remembered, the trees seeming to lean toward the road, their branches gnarled like skeletal fingers. The man from Fuller's Creek was waiting at the edge of the road, his lantern casting long, flickering shadows. He gestured for her to park and join him. "Did you bring it?" he asked without preamble. Lisa nodded, pulling a small photo frame from her bag. It was a picture of her and Josh, taken a year earlier at a family picnic. "This is what I'm afraid of losing most," she said, her voice barely steady. The man's eyes softened for a moment before his expression turned grim. "Good. You'll need it." He motioned for her to follow him onto a narrow path that led into the woods. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The air felt heavy, suffocating, and the faint sound of sobbing seemed to come from all directions. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small clearing. In the center was a ring of ancient stones, each etched with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. The man handed Lisa a bundle of herbs and a small knife. "You're going to have to open a door," he said. "This place is a threshold, but it's sealed. The only way to stop what's happening is to go through and face it." Lisa hesitated. "Face what?" The man's eyes darted nervously around the clearing. "Emily and whatever's keeping her here. But once the door opens, it won't just be her. Others might come through. You'll have to be quick." Before Lisa could ask what he meant, a low, guttural growl rumbled through the woods. The man's face went pale. "They know we're here." Lisa fumbled with the herbs and knife, unsure of what to do. The man began chanting under his breath, his voice shaking. The growl grew louder, joined by the sound of branches snapping and leaves rustling. Something was coming. And then, just as Lisa began to carve a symbol into the ground, her phone buzzed again. She pulled it from her pocket, glancing at the screen. Another message. "Stop now. He's lying." Her stomach dropped. She turned to the man, whose chant had grown louder, more frantic. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why are you helping me?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed the knife from her hand and slashed at the air, his movements wild and desperate. The glowing symbols on the stones flared brighter, and a low, inhuman wail filled the clearing. Suddenly, the air around them grew thick with shadows. Figures began to emerge, pale, translucent, and twisted. Emily was among them, her hollow eyes locked on Lisa. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood dozens of other figures, their faces contorted in silent screams. The man stepped back, his face contorted in terror. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered. "The door, it's—" Before he could finish, one of the figures lunged at him, dragging him into the shadows. His scream was cut short, leaving Lisa alone in the circle. Emily stepped forward, her movements jerky and unnatural. Her lips moved, but her voice didn't match. It was layered. Like before, a chorus of voices crying out. "You shouldn't have come." Lisa clutched the photo frame to her chest. "I just want to end this," she said, her voice trembling. "I want to help you." Emily's head tilted, her eyes narrowing. "Help me?" she echoed. "You can't help me. You can only replace me." Lisa's breath caught. "What do you mean?" The other figures began to close in, their whispers growing louder. The photo in Lisa's hands grew warm, then hot, as if burning her. She dropped it, and the frame shattered, revealing something hidden beneath the backing, a piece of paper covered in the same glowing symbols as the stones. Emily's expression changed, a flicker of fear passing across her face. "Where did you get that?" Lisa stared at the paper, realization dawning. It wasn't just a photo, it was part of the spell, part of what had kept Emily and the others bound to the road. But if that was true, who had put it there? And why was it connected to her family? Before she could think further, the whispering stopped, replaced by a single, chilling voice from the darkness. "You've always belonged to us." The ground beneath her feet began to tremble, and the shadows surged forward. As Lisa braced herself, clutching the paper, she realized one horrifying truth. The door wasn't just opening, it was pulling her through. The shadows engulfed Lisa, cold and suffocating, like plunging into an icy lake. The world around her twisted, the faint glow of the symbols on the paper in her hands the only anchor to reality. The figures from the circle melted into the darkness, their ghostly shapes flickering like dying flames, but Emily remained. Her hollow eyes stared at Lisa, unblinking, as the void swallowed them both. And then, everything stopped. Lisa opened her eyes to find herself standing in a warped version of Rainbow Road. The trees were taller, darker, their branches clawing at a sky streaked with crimson and black. The air buzzed with a low hum, and distant screams echoed faintly, like memories trapped in the wind. The road beneath her feet was cracked and slick with something that glistened like oil. Emily stood a few feet away, but now she looked different. Her torn white dress was pristine, and her face, though pale, was human, almost alive. She smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. "You shouldn't be here," Emily said softly, her voice no longer layered with others. "But now that you are, you'll see the truth." Lisa turned, drawn to a faint movement in the woods. Shadows shifted between the trees, watching her with glowing eyes, red, yellow, green, and more, like jewels in the dark. As she stared, she realized they weren't hiding. They were waiting. "What are they?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Emily's gaze followed hers. "They're the ones who brought me here. They brought all of us here." Lisa's grip tightened on the paper in her hands. "Why? What do they want?" Emily tilted her head, her smile fading. "They don't want. They take. They take what we are, piece by piece, and leave us hollow. Trapped." Lisa shook her head. "No. There has to be a way out." "You said the paper, these symbols." She unfolded the paper, the glowing markings casting faint light on the twisted road. "This can stop it, can't it?" Emily's eyes flicked to the paper, her expression unreadable. "It's not a way out for you," she said finally. "It's a way in for them." The words hit Lisa like a punch to the chest. She stared at the glowing symbols, the truth dawning on her. The man hadn't been trying to stop the curse, he'd been trying to unleash it fully. From behind, Lisa heard a voice she recognized, a voice that froze her blood. "Lisa!" She spun around to see Josh, standing in the middle of the road. He looked terrified, his eyes wide and pleading. "Lisa, help me. I don't know how I got here." Lisa's heart raced. She ran toward him, but Emily stepped in her path, grabbing her arm with an iron grip. "That's not him," Emily said, her voice sharp and urgent. Lisa yanked her arm free. "What are you talking about?" "It's my brother." Emily's eyes darkened. "No, it's theirs. It's what they do. They'll use anything to pull you deeper. Don't listen." Josh's voice grew louder, desperate. "Lisa, please. It hurts. Don't leave me here." Lisa hesitated, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and fear. She turned back to Emily. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Emily's expression softened, and for the first time, she looked sad. "You don't," she admitted. "But if you go to him, you won't come back." The ground beneath them began to crack, and from the fissures spilled a blinding light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The glowing eyes in the woods began to move closer, their forms still hidden but their presence suffocating. The hum in the air grew louder, more insistent, like a chant with no words. Emily stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. "You have to choose. Either burn the paper and sever the connection, or use it and open the way fully. But decide fast." Lisa's mind reeled. "Burn it? What happens to you? To the others?" Emily's smile returned, but this time it was almost human. "We fade. We go where we should have gone long ago. And if I open it?" Emily's face turned grim. "Then they come through. Into your world." Josh's voice broke through the rising noise, louder now, almost a scream. "Lisa, please, don't leave me." Lisa's hand shook as she reached for the lighter in her pocket. She glanced at the glowing symbols, then at Josh and finally at Emily. "What if you're lying?" Lisa whispered. Emily's gaze didn't waver. "Then you'll find out too late." Before Lisa could act, the rift exploded with light, and from the cracks emerged a figure tall, impossibly thin, its limbs bending in ways that defied reason. Its face was a void, but its presence radiated malevolence. The shadows in the woods surged forward, bowing as if in reverence. The creature turned toward Lisa, and though it had no eyes, she felt it looking through her, into her very soul. Emily stepped between Lisa and the creature, her form flickering like a dying flame. Run, she whispered, before it notices you. But Lisa couldn't move. The creature raised a spindly hand, pointing at her, and she felt the air around her grow heavy, her vision narrowing. The paper in her hands began to burn on its own, the symbols flaring brightly before the edges crumbled into ash. Lisa! Josh's voice screamed, but it sounded different now, distorted, hollow, almost mocking. The last thing Lisa saw before everything went dark was Emily's face, her lips forming the words, "It's not over." Lisa woke up in her car, parked on the shoulder of Rainbow Road. The forest was silent, the road empty. The photo frame was gone, and her hands were covered in soot. Her phone buzzed. A single text glowed on the screen. "You chose well. For now." Lisa looked up and saw the faint outline of a figure in her rearview mirror. Not Emily, not Josh, something else. And then it was gone. Lisa sat frozen in her car, the cryptic text burning in her mind. Her trembling hands gripped the steering wheel as she glanced back at the road, now eerily silent and empty. The figure in her mirror was gone, but the sense of being watched lingered. Back home, Lisa tried to return to normal, but Rainbow Road wouldn't let her go. She dreamt of Emily every night, her sorrowful eyes, her cryptic warnings. The glowing symbols appeared in Lisa's mind unbidden, and the whispers followed her everywhere. One evening, weeks later, Lisa found a new note on her doorstep, written in the same script as the paper she'd burned. "You stopped it for now, but the road is never satisfied. Be ready when it calls again." As Lisa looked out at the darkened street, she swore she saw glowing eyes watching her from the shadows. The whispers began anew, growing louder with each passing night. And deep in the woods of Barrington, on the cursed stretch of Rainbow Road, the cracks in the earth began to glow once more. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.